Running back ranks, the top 48 for week 12. We're going to kick it off at the top with the nailed on, don't even think about it studs. Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Jonathan Taylor. Jahmyr Gibbs, the first week with Dan Campbell back calling plays, we saw a 50-50 split between Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. This last week, it shifted again. 72% of snaps to Jahmyr Gibbs, 66% backfield share, and 71% of routes. Tom, could this be the start of a phenomenal run for Jahmyr Gibbs if he's going to see 70% of the work in this backfield?
I think it's going to be volatile because, Dan Campbell really likes David Montgomery. This team really likes David Montgomery, and he's played a really good role for this team over the last couple of years. But even last week, where Gibbs wasn't getting it done on the ground, we saw him have 8 targets, 5 catches for 107 yards. Like, there are so few running backs in this league who can put up those kind of numbers in the receiving game, and so few that can give us that kind of cheat code advantage in PPR formats. This week, going up against the Giants at home, 50-point over-under, 10.5 favorites. Like, the Giants absolutely stink. They are dead last in rushing EPA allowed. They've allowed the second most adjusted fantasy points to the running back position. So, yeah, this feels like a spot where Jahmyr Gibbs could go nuclear, or we could see both Gibbs and Montgomery have 2 touchdowns apiece.
Yeah, it feels like a game where Dan Campbell and Lions could certainly run up the score and put a lot of points on the Giants. Moving into the A tier, we do have Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, and Derrick Henry. Saquon Barkley, the clear fire RB1 for most teams, most drafts this year, yet he is stinking it up. He is hurting a lot of people. He has only broken 20 points so far once this year. That was in week 8. Averaging 15.1 points per game. Tom, are we kind of gluttons for punishment consistently ranking Saquon Barkley this high, or is this potentially going to finally get right?
I mean, maybe we need to have a long, hard conversation about it, because if you look at running back points per game this year, Saquon Barkley is 14th. Guys ahead of him, DeAndre Swift, Javonte Williams, Kyron Williams, Josh Jacobs. I mean, of course, in points per game, you're taking into account for guys like Omarion Hampton, Cam Scadaboo as well, guys who haven't actually played very much lately. But because of his name value, he does get pushed up a little bit. And maybe it is an Achilles heel in how we're approaching this. But Saquon, 1 rushing touchdown in his last 6 games. He's been below 3.5 yards per carry in 3 of his last 4. There were kind of signs of life last week, though. He forced a season-high 7 missed tackles. Previous high that he'd got to was only 3. Now, this week, going up against the Dallas Cowboys, like, the Cowboys are a great matchup to have. They allow the 10th highest yards per carry to running backs, the 9th most yards per game. They rank 29th in rushing EPA allowed. They've allowed the 3rd most adjusted fantasy points to running back position. So if he can't do it here, when is he going to do it? And that's kind of partly why he's in the A tier, because there have been plenty of weeks where we have had him in the B tier.
Yeah, and we've probably got to mention the big news in terms of Lane Johnson injured, not going to play in this game. I think I've been going back and forth. Does that mean it's worse for the past game because then the offensive line can't hold up? Jalen Hurts can't push the ball downfield, so it's going to be better for the run game? Or is that bad for the run game because it's a significant downgrade in run blocking? I don't know which way it's going to go, but it's certainly not a great thing for Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, Bill Barnwell tweeted out that since 2013, the Eagles are the league's 3rd best offense by EPA per play with Lane Johnson on the field, but they're 28th over that time frame when he's not on the field. Like, I don't have those numbers split out for pass and run. I'd be very interested in seeing them if anybody's got them. But yeah, that is a huge drop-off.
Yeah, that is absolutely massive. And then we move on to Derrick Henry. Tom, the weather's getting colder. The dog walks in the morning are painful. It is so cold. So it means Derrick Henry is about to go on a tear and start destroying NFL defenses, surely.
Yeah, I know in your Dynasty Buys and Sells video this week, you mentioned Derrick Henry, and like, he's somebody that I bought on a contending team last week. And part of that is because, yes, plays the Jets this week. And then he plays the Bengals twice in a space of a couple of weeks. He also plays the Steelers in a couple of games, and the Steelers haven't been great against the run. They rank 28th. So Derrick Henry has a chance to really, not only capitalize on his own myth of like just infinitely being better towards the back end of a season, but facing some incredibly poor run defenses. Now, the Ravens' offensive line at the 2 guard spots has 2 of the worst guards in the league. Like, they're just absolutely atrocious, and that is part of what is going wrong for this whole offense. But it was reassuring to see Derrick Henry have his longest run of the season last week at 59 yards. That one run was better than anything he did when he played the Browns in week 2. It's reassuring to see Derrick Henry actually being used in the passing game a little bit more often than he has been last year. And going into this week against the Jets, who ranked 22nd against the run in EPA allowed, ranked 14th in fantasy points allowed, I just think if Lamar Jackson isn't going to get there, if he's not going to have a nuclear passing game, then it would make sense for the Ravens to really lean into Derrick Henry.
Absolutely. You said there, the Jets ranked 22nd in EPA allowed to the run. That was with Quinnen Williams playing the majority of those games. He's a very good run defender. He is now playing down in Dallas. So that run defense just got significantly worse. Well, if you've made it this far into the video and you've not yet hit the subscribe button, do us a solid. We're closing on a very nice milestone that we're hoping to hit by the Super Bowl. Help us get there. Hit that subscribe button down below. In the B tier, it is a chunky one this week. We've got TreVeyon Henderson, Kyron Williams, Rico Dowdle, Javonte Williams, Chase Brown, Travis Etienne, James Cook, and Quinshon Judkins. TreVeyon Henderson, the biggest hyped man in all of fantasy football at the moment. 2 phenomenal performances. We've got him. You've got him 7th. I've got him 8th overall. He is in the 3rd tier. Are we being harsh? Do we not like fun? Should TreVeyon Henderson be higher?
Well, maybe he should be lower because there's news out that Ramondre Stevenson's trying to play this week. And if that happens, you probably do have to knock him down and the fun takes a backward step. But coming off a 92% snap share last week, 86% running back share, 15% target share against the Jets, now going to take on the Cincinnati Bengals, who just absolutely stink. They've allowed the most adjusted fantasy points to the running back position. The only team worse than them against the run is the Giants. Like, they just cannot stop anyone whatsoever. And I think that TreVeyon could have another monster game here.
One player that I'm struggling with this week, Travis Etienne Jr., he's been phenomenal for fantasy purposes so far this year. I think a lot of people wrote him off. But last week, Bryson Facial Tootin was starting to eat into workload. Etienne has played an average of 72% of early down snaps. Last week, before the injury to Tootin, he was at 55%. It feels like this is becoming more of an even split on those early downs. But then Tootin left the game with an ankle injury, and we're not quite sure how healthy he is. So have you got some nervousness that Etienne could be in an even bigger of a timeshare than perhaps previously thought? Or do you think that he's good enough and this run game is looking to be good enough down the stretch that we don't need to worry and he's a solid RB2?
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. I think you kind of liken it to other offenses where you've got 2 good running backs and the offense is running through them. Now, obviously, this isn't David Montgomery and Jameer Gibbs or anything, but Etienne, over his last 3 games, has been over 15.5 PPR points in each of them, so there's enough for me to cling on to that I think it'll be fine. Yes, I'm excited about Tootin, and yes, I think he's going to do well. The Cardinals, they're just such a difficult team to judge week to week. Like, they have some real players on defense, but the Jags, their passing offense is absolutely stinking, but they're a top 3 team in rushing EPA. Like, Liam Cohen is absolutely just juicing that to the max and scheming things up. So until I see otherwise, I still have enough faith in Etienne. And I think that he's still holding enough of a role in the receiving game that I think that he'll be very relevant for PPR.
We move into the C tier where we do find Ashton Jeanty, Breece Hall, Emmanuel Wilson, Woody Marks, and Jaylen Warren. Tom, the Raiders spent a high first-round pick on Ashton Jeanty, and last week in the first half, they dropped back to pass on 90% of snaps. This offensive line lacks talent, lacks resources, but maybe one of the worst coached offensive lines I've ever seen. I then went to have a look at who the offensive line coach was because I was a little bit concerned as to what they were doing. And it's Pete Carroll's son, believe it or not. Do you think that we've got any hope for Ashton Jeanty as a fantasy option this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting quite tough, and you look back across his game log, and he's not been over 75 yards since week 6. He's only been over 75 yards a single time when he hit 138 yards in week 4. So things have been pretty poor. And against the Cowboys, like we talked about, like the Cowboys are a team that you can run on. They've gotten a little bit better of late, but to have 6 attempts for 7 yards is diabolical. And I think that we were too optimistic about Ashton Jeanty coming into the year. Like, obviously, it's a lot easier to say that now, but we're not seeing him being used creatively in the passing game. And going up against this Browns defense, who are just absolutely ferocious. And yes, they've allowed more rushing yards per game. They've dropped off in run defense since Dylan Gabriel and now Shedeur Sanders took over from Joe Flacco. But nobody allows fewer fantasy points to the running back position per game. So, yeah, I think that if you've got Ashton Jeanty in a league and you've got somebody you feel more confident in this week, I won't talk anybody out of starting them ahead of him.
Yeah, one player that I could conceivably consider starting over Ashton Jeanty, which I never thought I would, Emmanuel Wilson. After Josh Jacobs went down last week, he outplayed Chris Brooks. We saw 19 routes to Chris Brooks 1. He saw 11 carries to Chris Brooks 1. I thought Emmanuel Wilson looked good. I thought he looked good in space. I thought he was a bigger compliment in the receiving game than I expected. Do you think that Emmanuel Wilson could be a sneaky RB2 and someone that you can potentially have just grabbed off the waiver wire this week that could slot straight into your starting lineup?
Yeah, I do. I think that going up against the Vikings, they ranked 20th in run defense. They've not been as solid there as they were last year. And to your point, like Emmanuel Wilson was playing in the receiving game as well as the ground game, like 73% of routes he was out there, 5% target share. Yes, we'd like to see that kind of closer to at least 8 or 9%. But the Vikings, they're a team that are just spiraling a little bit with this game being at home. I think that Emmanuel Wilson will be all right. I do have a little bit of a concern about this game in general, that maybe the Vikings can't push the Packers enough to make it really, really explode for fantasy. But that probably just means Emmanuel Wilson is getting volume.
Absolutely. And, I think this offense is slightly dysfunctional right now without Tucker Kraft. I think you remove Josh Jacobs from that, I'm really worried. So I think they're going to have to lean on Emmanuel Wilson because it doesn't feel like there's anything solid, consistent, and reliable in this offense outside of that right now. One player that we were so excited and hyped for last week was Jaylen Warren. We talked about him potentially being the top 10. I think he finished in our top 12 running back ranks last week. Sadly, it didn't quite work out. Obviously, the injury. Kenneth Gainwell had a hell of a week, finishing with almost 30 fantasy points. How do we think this backfield plays out? Do we think there's any hope for Jaylen Warren getting some receiving work, or are we just resigning ourselves to the fact that that is now Kenneth Gainwell's territory?
I think it'll mix between things at times. Jaylen Warren is going to be out there predominantly on the first and second downs, maybe, and they will put Kenneth Gainwell out there on third downs. But Aaron Rodgers loves a check down. Like, nobody is throwing short as often as Aaron Rodgers. Now, Aaron Rodgers is pushing hard to play against the Bears. That's one of the opponents that means a lot to him because Aaron Rodgers has a really good record against the Bears historically. So this is one of Aaron Rodgers' little maybe retiring victory lap things. He wants to get a win. He wants to go into Chicago as an underdog and beat them. And Aaron Rodgers with a small fracture in his hand, I think that sounds like a recipe for handing the ball off a lot and checking the ball down. I would be very worried about DK Metcalf if Aaron Rodgers plays. The Bears, their run defense has allowed the 11th most fantasy points to opponents. They rank 17th in EPA allowed. So there are reasons to be optimistic, but there's probably a little bit of shuffling that will go on with the rankings and tiers as this week plays out, depending on what Aaron Rodgers is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think you're never going to see a quicker time to throw than perhaps Aaron Rodgers this week. I think he's already terrified of taking a hit. I think it's going to be even worse this week. Before we dive into the detail, though, if you do have any flex conversations, any trades that you want us to offer our opinion on, make sure you're diving into the comments below. Tom and I will give you our thoughts and our opinions on anything that you want. In the D tier, we do have DeAndre Swift, Aaron Jones, Kenneth Walker, Tyron Tracy, David Montgomery, Alvin Kamara, Kenneth Gainwell, Kareem Hunt, and Sean Tucker. Aaron Jones, I was super impressed with last week. I thought he looked explosive. I thought he looked really good in space. And I'm a little bit surprised that we've ended up both ranking him this low, to be quite honest.
Yeah, Green Bay are a good run defense. Like, they've had their moments where it's slipped a little bit at times, but on the whole, they've been very solid, top 12 unit. They've really held opposing running backs in check. They haven't given up many fantasy points to the position. So maybe this is one of those ones as Jalen Warren comes down. Aaron Jones is like moving up a few spots there. But yeah, Jordan Mason, season low 16% of snaps, season low 27% design carries, season low 6% route share, and only played on 1 of 5 red zone snaps, according to Chris Wecht of Fantasy Points. Like, it is all just Aaron Jones at the minute, and there'll be weeks where I feel better about him than others, and this is one where I just have a little bit of trepidation.
One player that I don't know quite what to think of him from week to week because I don't know what this backfield split is going to be is Tyron Tracy. It was pretty much exactly 50-50 split between he and Devin Singletary. Both of them got home with over 17 fantasy points each. But do you have any nervousness around this being a 50-50 split at best for Tyron Tracy?
A little bit, because he's not getting the goal line work, is he? It's like Devin Singletary had 2 rushing touchdowns last week, and that's how he got home. But Tyron Tracy is getting the receiving work. So if you're giving me a team who are 10-point underdogs on the road against a Detroit team who we know are going to put up points and quite happy to run up the score, then I think Tyron Tracy is a fine play here. I mean, the Lions, they don't give up huge amounts of points to the running back position, but they are a little bit more susceptible to running backs catching the ball.
I would say I agree with you that Tyron Tracy was getting the receiving work in terms of raw volume. He obviously saw 4 targets to Devin Singletary's 1. They both ran 15 routes. So I wouldn't be shocked if we saw that settle down and maybe regress slightly if that trend is going to continue into future weeks. We've probably got to touch on Kareem Hunt. It's not nice. It's not pretty, but he's getting the volume. We may see Isaiah Pacheco back. It's not 100% sure. We don't have him ranked currently. Is this just purely a hold your nose, close your eyes, and kind of stick Kareem Hunt in a flex play because the volume's there, or is there any more hope than that?
Yeah, and let's not forget Pacheco didn't look particularly great before the injury anyway, and Kareem Hunt was getting a good chunk of work there and getting work around the goal line at times. So I think this is where Kareem Hunt belongs because the offense isn't running through him. You know, the Chiefs are a very pass-heavy team right now. Their offense is, when they choose to run the ball, it's efficient, but it's not explosive. It's not something we use to wear down opponents at the minute. It's more just, it's functional. And the Colts have been better, you know, they've been better against the pass than they have been against a run. So maybe that's a way which Pacheco can get at them. But I just kind of view I view Kareem Hunt every week as like a touchdown or bust bet.
One player who scored 34 fantasy points last week, and yet we've got him ranked at the bottom of our D tier. It's not so often you see that. Sean Tucker felt like he was taking over this backfield from Rachaad White. 65% backfield share, similar in terms of target shares in the passing game, but maybe Bucky Irving back this week. Neither of us have got him ranked at the time of recording. Why so low on Sean Tucker with no Bucky Irving? No hope that he could potentially outplay this ranking?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's really difficult when you see these kind of big outlier weeks for players and players who typically haven't had massive volume. I mean, Sean Tucker last week, even with all this and absolutely cooking, only played 45% of snaps. Like, it wasn't like the team just went, holy crap, Sean Tucker is looking so good right now. We've got to get Sean Tucker the ball even more and just lent into it. Instead, it was just a case of like, you know, he had 19 rush attempts, which isn't a ridiculous amount. Like, and he just kept finding the end zone. The Bills are a team you can run on. We talked about it last week that, you know, the Bills are not a team that you need to be afraid of. If you can stay in the game and if you can run on the Bills, then you are going to be absolutely fine. Whereas this week going up against the Rams, who will have the second fewest fantasy points to the running back position, who rank top 3 in run defense EPA, it just feels like a whole different story. And I'm not sure I trust him to be consistent with that. And I still don't know how the split's going to kind of work week to week. So, yeah, maybe I get egg on my face for this one. But right now, I'm kind of okay with where I've got him ranked based on the limited sample size we've seen.
And then in the E tier, we do have Zach Charbonnet, Zonovan Knight, Rashad White, Tajay Spears, Tony Pollard, Bayshore Tootin, Devin Singletary, Carl Monangai, and Tyler Algier. Carl Monangai, it's back to a 2/3, 1/3 split in favor of DeAndre Swift. Yes, he did outscore DeAndre Swift because he found the end zone last week. But is it just a case of he's unusable and he's kind of a touchdown or bust flex option, or have you got any more hopes and dreams for Carl Monangai moving forward?
Well, it is difficult. And, DeAndre Swift earned that role. Like, when he got injured, he'd been playing well. So fair enough to see him come back. And, I'm not a big DeAndre Swift fan typically. So me saying that should carry a decent amount of credence for how well he's played. But his output, DeAndre Swift, he's coming off the lowest fantasy output of the season last week, scored 9 PPR points, first time he's been below 10 since week 1. He has also had a sub 6% target share in 3 of his last 4 games. JJ Zacharyson pointed that out. And last week, his route share of 31% was a season low. So if Carl Monangai can pick up a little bit of receiving work, find his way into the end zone, he can carve out enough of a role for fantasy that it's fine for us. And this Steelers team, they ranked 28th against the run in EPA allowed, so there's definitely a possibility that he can have a good week, but I don't feel amazing about this one at the same time.
And then finally in our F tier, we do have Jordan Mason, Michael Carter, Keaton Mitchell, Nick Chubb, and Blake Corum. Keaton Mitchell, you talked earlier about the incredible run of matchups that Derrick Henry has got. We saw Keaton Mitchell see a season-high 26% of snaps last week. Have you got any hopes that Keaton Mitchell can continue to earn some snap share and maybe be a sneaky option given the amazing run of matchups that the Ravens are now facing?
I'm a little conflicted because Justice Hill's back at practice on Wednesday. He missed against the Browns, which made it a little bit easier for Keaton Mitchell to see more snaps. I think they probably would have liked to have had Justice Hill a trust against the likes of Myles Garrett on that defensive line. And it wasn't like he took a complete, just that role completely. Like, they were splitting the routes between him and Rasheen Ali. Like, they were both between 22 and 30% routes run. Whereas Justice Hill, when Justice Hill's out there, you see him run above 40% of routes more typically. So it's not a direct one-to-one there. I think, though, John Harbaugh said, the coaching staff during the bye week, they said we have to get Keaton Mitchell more involved. And it's shown because when he sees the ball, he's explosive. He really can change a game very quickly. He can open up lanes that other running backs on that team haven't. But I do think unless you're playing in some of the deeper leagues where you start in 2 or 3 flex positions, he's probably not in consideration.
Yeah, I think he's purely a handcuff at this point, and maybe if Derrick Henry got injured, there'd be some excitement, some upside there. But it's a bit of a stretch to think that he's going to turn into a week-to-week or even a startable option this week, even though it is a good matchup. And that is it. We have made it this far. If you want more of Tom and I's content, you can hit the join button down below, become a member of the Fantasy Sanctuary, get access to so much more premium content including Tom's previews of every single matchup, my review of every single fantasy relevant player, the rookie guide, rankings, and so much more. On your way out, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and of course, check out these other videos that we've released this week.